"I'm giving you one choice," she said, voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "Approve it, or we're done." I froze, my hands still gripping the coffee mug that had grown cold between my palms. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged in my throat like gravel. My wife, Marissa, standing there in the kitchen of our Austin townhouse, was calm, almost eerily serene, but the weight of her ultimatum pressed down like a lead blanket. I'd known her for 14 years, been married for 10, and yet here she was, flipping our life upside down in a single breath. Approve her affair or sign the papers that would end us. I took a step back, trying to process. My brain refused to settle on reality. An affair? Marissa? The woman who had met me at a tailgate outside the Cowboys stadium, laughing so hard at my terrible pun about football that I swore I'd never seen a smile like hers. The woman who had packed my lunch every morning in that slightly crooked Tupperware container. The one with the tiny crack I swore she'd fix every time she packed a peanut butter sandwich. The woman who, on our 3rd anniversary, drove me down to San Antonio just so I could see the Alamo at sunset. How could she now, in our own kitchen, calmly issue a choice that felt like a slap to the face and a bomb to the heart all at once? I remember the first time I knew Marissa was special. It was a random Thursday, the kind that feels gray until someone adds color. I was at the diner on South Congress, my usual stool at the counter by the window, nursing a cup of burnt black coffee, when she slid into the seat next to me. "Is that the worst cup of coffee in Texas?" she asked, tone amused but not mean. I laughed, because it was true. That was the start, an awkward conversation about bad coffee, classic rock, and our shared love for cheap football memorabilia. Within weeks, we were road tripping to Dallas for minor league games, laughing over gas station nachos, making up our own chants in the car. Within a year, we'd moved in together, and within 2, I was proposing to the girl who could make me feel like every small town in Texas was magical. Our early years were a blur of happy chaos. Cookouts in the backyard with friends from work, where the smell of grilled sausages mixed with fresh grass and laughter. Football Sundays in our cramped apartment, the TV blaring ESPN while Marissa tried and failed to follow the play-by-play. We had a little Sunday ritual, her pancakes with blueberry syrup, me grumbling about the Cowboys losing, and the comfort of knowing we were together, imperfectly but wholeheartedly. I thought we were untouchable, that no storm could break the bubble we lived in. But life has a way of sneaking in cracks, tiny fissures that seem harmless at first. It was subtle, a glance that lingered too long at her phone, an absent-minded smile when she thought I wasn't looking. Calls she said were from the office at odd hours. I chalked it up to stress, long hours at the marketing firm she'd always been passionate about. Sometimes, I'd catch her staring out of the window at dusk, the light painting her face like a portrait, and I'd ask, "What's on your mind?" She'd smile, say, "Nothing," and return to scrolling her phone. I told myself that was normal. Everyone has private thoughts. Everyone has moments they keep to themselves. We had moved to Austin with dreams, her dream job, my small but growing digital marketing agency. Our weekends were filled with farmers markets, Sunday drives down to Lake Travis, even the occasional camping trip in the hill country. Friends came and went, but our little nucleus was strong. I thought I knew her completely. I thought I'd always know. Then came the change that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't a dramatic event at first, just small inconsistencies. A credit card receipt from a restaurant I didn't recognize. An overnight trip she said was team bonding, but left her phone at home, and the late-night texting that she'd dismiss as work chatter. I tried to confront it gently, asking if she was happy, if something was wrong. She'd brush it off with that calm smile, that easy laugh that used to melt me. "You worry too much," she'd say, and for a moment, I'd believe her. But the nagging feeling didn't fade. It grew. It crawled into the corners of my mind, turning mundane moments into suspect scenes. Her perfume lingered longer than usual on the sheets. Her clothes smelled faintly of someone else's cologne. And then came the ultimatum, like a meteor crashing into the life we'd built together. Approve her affair, or she'd leave. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to hold on to composure, my eyes scanning the room for some anchor to reality. The faded Texas flag poster above the fridge, the Bud Light can she'd left on the counter after last night's Netflix binge, the framed photo of us at the Austin City Limits Festival, sunburned but smiling. Each object a reminder of years spent building a life that now felt like a lie. I wanted to scream, to argue, to beg, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I stayed silent, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Her gaze didn't waver. She set down her phone, took a sip from her glass of Chardonnay, and waited. I hated the calm in her eyes, the way she'd weaponized serenity. It was the same serenity that had drawn me to her, now turned into a cold blade. I thought about the first fight we'd had, years ago, over something trivial, a spilled coffee, a missed dinner. We'd screamed, yes, but eventually we'd patched things up. There had been tears, apologies, compromise. We had survived before. But this was different. This was not a momentary clash of tempers. This was a decision that would decide the course of our lives forever. I reached for my phone, instinctively, even though I didn't know what I'd do with it. My thumb hovered over the contacts, over messages that I'd never imagined sending. My chest tightened, my mind racing through scenarios that were both horrifying and impossible. Approve the affair? Was that even a life? Or deny it and face the end of everything we'd built? And in the background, beneath the fear and disbelief, a small, insidious thought crept in. What if this was just the tip of the iceberg? Because deep down, I knew there were layers I hadn't seen. The late-night calls, the evasive answers, the faint scent on her scarf. It all hinted at a world she hadn't invited me into. I had to find out what was real, what was fabricated, and what was yet to come. I couldn't make a decision in the dark. I needed to see, to know. And the moment I decided to take a breath, to steady myself, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about approval or divorce. This was about control, about truth, about the life we'd shared and whether it had been built on sand all along. Marissa smiled again, that unsettlingly serene smile, and I felt my resolve harden. I wouldn't just make a decision blindly. I wouldn't let her dictate the terms of my existence. I would uncover everything. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally understand the magnitude of the betrayal hiding behind that calm exterior. I looked at her, at the woman I had loved more fiercely than anyone else in my life, and the weight of the coming storm pressed down. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this was no longer just a marriage at stake. It was the revelation of a secret world, one that could destroy everything I thought I knew. And that's when I saw it, the first real crack in her armor, subtle, fleeting, but unmistakable. A twitch at the corner of her mouth, a hesitation in her otherwise poised stance, like a ghost of guilt brushing across her skin. For a moment, the calm shattered, and in that fraction of a second, I understood one thing with crystal clarity. The choice she'd laid before me was never about me approving or refusing. It was about whether I'd uncover the truth. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched, and I waited. Because I knew that in a few days, or maybe even hours, the life we knew would no longer exist. And the path to finding out exactly what had been hidden from me would lead to consequences I couldn't yet imagine. I needed more concrete proof, something that couldn't be rationalized away. I began leaving my phone unattended, watching her interactions with a subtle vigilance. One evening, she thought I was asleep and left her phone on the counter. A single notification popped up. "See you tonight." Don't worry, he's clueless. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just seeing someone. She was orchestrating an entire secret existence while framing it as ordinary life. I had never felt so powerless in my own home. To catch her completely, I installed a discreet camera in the corner of our living room, one that captured movement and audio, but blended seamlessly with the decor. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I needed clarity. Over the next week, I watched the footage, holding my breath, each playback revealing more: whispered phone calls, hushed laughter, intimate moments she'd shared with someone else under the guise of her regular schedule. It was surreal, like watching a life I thought I knew transform into a movie where I wasn't even a character, just an observer of betrayal. I also went through our bills with a fine-toothed comb, cross-referencing dates with hotel charges and gas receipts. The financial footprint was undeniable. Charges matched locations that aligned perfectly with the time she claimed to be at the office or with friends. Patterns emerged that could only indicate one thing: premeditation. This was not a fleeting mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a constructed double life, with precision and planning that made my head spin. Every piece of evidence I gathered was another knife twisting in the trust we had built. And yet, I didn't act immediately. I didn't confront her, didn't yell or demand explanations. I waited, I collected. I built a dossier of betrayal that, when complete, would be impossible for her to deny. There was a strange clarity in this meticulous investigation, a grim satisfaction in seeing the truth unfold layer by layer, even as it tore my heart apart. And then came the night that changed everything. Marissa returned home later than usual, claiming she'd been working a client dinner downtown. She walked in, smiled at me with that same serene expression, unaware that I had already seen the pictures, read the messages, and pieced together the timeline of her deception. I stood in the kitchen, my notebook open on the counter, the photos printed and spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom. "I thought you were at work," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing her face, just for a second, barely perceptible. "Yeah, long dinner," she replied, forcing a smile. I nodded slowly, letting her words hang in the air, weighing them against the facts in front of me. I couldn't help myself. I picked up one of the printed photos, a simple hotel selfie, her hand intertwined with his. "Who is this?" I asked, holding it between us. She laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as casual acquaintances. But the camera footage, the receipts, the messages, they didn't lie. I let the silence stretch, each second amplifying the tension, the inevitability of revelation. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my laptop, going through every detail I had collected: timestamps, receipts, messages, photos, GPS data. The pattern was undeniable. The man she'd been seeing wasn't a fleeting fling. It was a calculated, ongoing affair. And now, with the DNA kit, the evidence suggested something even more sinister: her involvement in plans that could irrevocably change our family structure. By morning, I realized I was at a crossroads. The evidence was complete, undeniable, and horrifying. I had everything I needed to confront her, not just with suspicion, but with proof. Yet the question remained: how do you confront the person you love with the fact that they've been living a secret life, manipulating you, betraying the very foundation of your marriage? And more importantly, what would she do when faced with the evidence I now held? Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The proof wasn't just about catching her, it was about uncovering how far this went and what she was capable of. And the thought of what came next, what I'd do with the truth, was both terrifying and liberating. The Saturday morning sun cut through the blinds like sharp knives, illuminating the chaos I had meticulously prepared. I didn't wait for Marissa to notice the changes. I had set the stage myself. The photos, the receipts, the messages, they were all laid out across the dining table, a visual indictment of years of deception. I wanted her to feel the weight of it, the undeniable truth pressing down like the Texas heat outside. She walked in, humming a tune she often used to fill the silence when she knew I was brooding. Her steps faltered when she saw the evidence spread across the table, as if the air itself had thickened, trapping her in the reality she had ignored for so long. Her eyes flicked from one printout to the next, lingering on a hotel receipt dated months ago, and then to the photos of her hand in another man's, each one crisp and intimate. "Marissa." My voice was calm, deceptively calm, each syllable measured. She tilted her head, forcing a casual smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What is all this?" she asked, voice brittle, as if she had rehearsed ignorance 1,000 times in front of a mirror. "This," I said, gesturing to the table, "is everything. Every lie, every secret, every time you thought I wouldn't notice." I picked up a photo from last November, her and the man, laughing over drinks at a hotel lounge. The date was printed at the bottom. "Who is he?" Her laughter wavered, cracking. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. He's nothing, just a friend." I let her words hang, like a poisoned echo. "A friend who shows up at hotels in the middle of the night? A friend who has your heart when I thought I did?" I moved a few receipts closer, letting them fall onto her hands. "These are gas receipts, credit card statements, GPS locations. You've been living another life." Her composure started to crumble. She swallowed, shifting from foot to foot. I don't know what to say." "You don't get to say anything," I interrupted, voice slicing through the kitchen air. "Not until you explain every lie, every secret meeting, every single night you spent away from me. You forced me into a choice: approve the affair or be discarded. Do you understand what that means?" My hands trembled slightly, a mix of anger and heartbreak, as I held up a USB drive containing the photos she thought she had hidden from me. She backed toward the fridge, her fingers brushing against the surface as if it were a lifeline. I never wanted to hurt you. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I snapped, cutting her off. "I understand that you've been manipulating our life together, our marriage, and our kids. I understand that the person I trusted the most has been betraying me behind my back. And I understand one more thing. Everything you've done, you thought I'd never find out. But I did. Her face paled, her lips quivering. I could see the realization settling in, the fear creeping in like a shadow stretching across the room. She opened her mouth to protest again, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "You're going to explain it," I said, lowering my voice, making it almost intimate in its intensity. "Everything. And you're going to do it here, where I can see that you're not hiding behind lies anymore." Marissa's phone buzzed, a sharp interruption. She glanced at it, her fingers trembling. A message preview flashed across the screen. "He knows. I'll call you later." She looked up at me, eyes wide, panic-stricken. "You see that?" I said, pointing at the phone. "Even your side knows it's over. Everyone is watching now, whether you like it or not." That was when I decided it was time to escalate. I had invited her closest friends and family over for what I had described as a casual BBQ, nothing suspicious. But the moment she had entered the house, they had noticed the tension, the photos, the receipts. Friends exchanged uneasy glances, the kind that spoke louder than words. Her mother, seated at the table, her hands folded, stared at Marissa with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. "I can't believe you," her mother said, voice shaking. "All these years, you've been lying to everyone?" Marissa's lips quivered and she stumbled backward. "Mom, it's not like that." "Oh, it's exactly like that," I cut in, my tone icy, precise. "Do you see this?" I picked up a credit card statement with hotel charges clearly not related to work. "Or this." I held a photo of her hand in his, the intimacy undeniable. "We trusted you. I trusted you. And you threw it away like it was nothing." Her friends murmured, glancing at each other, whispers carrying across the room. Marissa tried to regain control, raising her voice. "You're overreacting. It's complicated. It's just someone I've been seeing." "Seeing?" I repeated, incredulous. "Seeing? Do you have any idea how that sounds?" I paused, letting the words sink in, the weight of public humiliation pressing down. "You've manipulated, lied, and planned, and you thought you could hide it from me, from everyone. But look around. Everyone sees it now." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Her friends, witnesses to years of loyalty, now stared with judgment. Her mother's hands shook, clutching a napkin. Her father, seated at the far end, "It's fine," didn't speak, but the anger in his eyes could cut steel. Marissa's composure finally broke. She sank onto a chair, covering her face with her hands. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" I echoed, voice rising. "You gave me a choice. Approve your affair or be discarded. That's not a mistake. That's manipulation. That's betrayal. And I'm done pretending it's anything else." Her phone buzzed again. I noticed the man she had been seeing trying to call. She ignored it, but I seized the moment. I picked up the phone, swiped the notification, and held it up so everyone could see. Missed calls, texts, each one proof of the double life she had led. The room felt heavier with every passing second, the kind of silence that only comes after a bomb has detonated. Friends leaned in, whispers spilling. "I can't believe this. She's been hiding it for years. Did you see the photos?" I turned back to Marissa, my voice low but cutting. "You made your choice. I made mine. And now everyone knows." Her eyes met mine, filled with fear, regret, and a flicker of desperation. "Please, I can explain. I can fix this." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "There's nothing to fix. You can't erase the past, the lies, the manipulation. You've burned this bridge, and now everyone can see the smoke." I picked up the USB drive and handed it to her mother. She tried to hide everything, but the truth is out now. Everyone can see it. She has to face it. Tears streamed down Marissa's face. She looked around the room at the witnesses, friends, family, everyone who mattered, and for the first time, I saw the weight of accountability settle on her shoulders. It was a moment of public reckoning, a culmination of years of betrayal, and the satisfaction was bitter but necessary. As she slumped into the chair, sobbing, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure, about revealing the truth to everyone involved. And in that moment, the power dynamics shifted completely. The manipulator was stripped bare, standing in the ruin of the life she had constructed with lies. I left the kitchen, stepping onto the porch with a Bud Light in hand, letting the sun warm my back as I listened to the aftermath. The faint sound of her crying drifted out, mingling with the murmurs of family and friends. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. But before I could fully exhale, Marissa's phone buzzed again. She grabbed it with trembling hands, her eyes wide as she read the message. I glimpsed the words, "He knows everything. Be ready." My heart skipped a beat, realizing that even though the confrontation was over, the consequences were far from finished. Someone else knew. Someone else had been watching. The moment froze in time, the sun casting long shadows across the porch, the faint hum of conversation in the house, the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. It was the calm before a storm I hadn't fully anticipated, a storm that promised to tear apart more than just our marriage. And in that instant, I understood. The confrontation had been only the beginning. The real reckoning was yet to come, and it would be far more destructive than anyone in that room could imagine. The Monday after the confrontation felt like walking through the debris of a hurricane. Not the kind with wind and rain, but the kind that rips through trust and leaves chaos in its wake. Marissa had moved out that night, taking what little she could carry in 2 suitcases, her face pale and hollow, her eyes avoiding mine entirely. I stood on the porch, sipping a Bud Light, watching her car disappear down the street. It was over, or at least the chapter of living under the same roof was. The house was quiet, but every corner carried echoes of betrayal. The dining table still held a few prints of photos, receipts, and hotel bills, reminders of what had been exposed. I didn't bother clearing them yet. They weren't trophies, they were lessons. I wanted to remember. I wanted to understand just how fragile trust could be, and how easily it could shatter when someone you love manipulates reality with practiced skill. The first week alone was strange. I woke up at 6 a.m., the sun painting gold streaks across the kitchen, and found myself making pancakes for the kids, the smell of syrup and butter filling the space that Marissa once dominated with chatter and complaints. I noticed small things, the way my daughter's crayon drawings leaned against the fridge, a new doodle of our family, without her mother included. It was innocent, innocent, heartbreaking, and strangely healing all at once. Phone calls from friends poured in. Some offered comfort, others subtle judgment, but all confirmed what I had already felt. The world had witnessed the exposure. Marissa's reputation had taken a hit, the whispers following her like shadows. Even her closest friends couldn't defend the affair. They had been blindsided too. There was a strange satisfaction in that, not in revenge, but in justice. She couldn't manipulate the narrative anymore. The story was mine to tell, and truth had a weight that lies never could. Legal matters followed. I hired a divorce attorney familiar with high-conflict cases. Marissa insisted on contesting custody, as though her betrayal didn't carry consequences. But the evidence was undeniable. Receipts, photos, messages, the hotel bookings, and even the videos from the anonymous upload that had surfaced after our confrontation. It became clear to her lawyer, and eventually to her, that any attempt to twist the narrative would crumble in court. The mediation was tense. Sitting across from her, the once familiar warmth replaced by cold calculation, I realized how little remained of the woman I had loved. She tried to negotiate, throwing numbers around, demanding leniency, and at one point, even suggested I allow the affair to continue if I wanted to maintain peace. I laughed quietly, a sharp, humorless sound. Peace? There was no peace in betrayal, only aftermath. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the evidence in silence. Marissa's face turned pale as each document was laid bare, each text and photo dissected. I stayed calm, presenting the facts without flourish. There was no need for theatrics. The truth spoke louder than any argument. By the end, the judge granted me primary custody of the children, a fair division of assets, and limited Marissa's visitation rights. She was free to live her life, but the consequences of her decisions were firmly in place. Back home, I began rebuilding. The quiet mornings became a ritual. I poured coffee into a chipped mug that had belonged to my grandmother, flipping through the morning newspaper while the kids played in the living room. ESPN highlights hummed in the background, the familiar announcer's voice grounding me in normalcy. On the porch, I let the sun hit my face, Bud Light in hand, feeling the tension of months of betrayal slowly dissipate. Evenings were hardest at first. I would glance at the empty side of the bed, remembering the laughter, the warmth, the intimacy that had been replaced by lies. But I found small ways to heal. Late-night drives with the kids, road trips to the local diner, watching them devour pancakes dripping with syrup, the smell filling the car with comfort. I rediscovered joy in mundane moments, folding laundry with music playing in the background, helping with homework, attending school plays. These simple acts were my therapy, grounding me in reality rather than the chaos Marissa had left behind. Social media offered its own kind of closure. The anonymous video that had initially shocked me went viral in our small town, sparking heated debates and sympathy for the children left in the middle of the storm. Marissa's online presence took a nosedive. Friends unfollowed, acquaintances whispered, and the man she had been seeing disappeared quietly from the narrative. Watching from a distance, I felt no triumph, only relief. The world knew. The truth was no longer mine to bear alone. I also took time to reflect deeply. I wrote down my feelings, not as a diary of pain, but as a roadmap for my healing. Every note, every scribble, reminded me that I had survived the emotional equivalent of a natural disaster. I learned that sometimes letting go wasn't about forgiveness. It was about reclaiming your life from the wreckage. My children became my anchor, their laughter a balm I hadn't realized I desperately needed. By the third month, life had stabilized. The house was quiet but alive with normalcy. Pancake mornings became sacred, the small moments of connection more important than ever. I would sit on the porch in the evenings, Bud Light in hand, watching the neighborhood kids play, listening to the faint hum of traffic, and I finally felt free. Not free from pain, not free from memories, but free from manipulation. Free to live life on my terms again. One afternoon, while organizing old photos, I stumbled upon a picture from our early years, a road trip through the Rockies, smiling, carefree, oblivious to what the future held. I smiled, feeling a pang of nostalgia, but also gratitude. I had loved fully, and even though that love had been betrayed, it didn't diminish the experiences we shared. It simply meant I could now love differently, with eyes open, cautious but resilient. I also embraced a touch of humor in the aftermath. One night, while watching the kids draw with crayons on the living room floor, my son held up a sketch of a house labeled, "Our Safe Home." I chuckled, realizing the truth in it. Sometimes, the children teach us more about healing than any adult wisdom. And sometimes, even the most bitter of experiences can produce something unexpectedly wholesome. As the final legal papers were signed and Marissa's name faded from our household, I felt a strange sense of closure. The divorce wasn't a victory in the traditional sense. It was a necessary step toward reclaiming peace. I had won nothing with malice, and yet I had gained everything in clarity. That night, I sat on the porch, kids asleep, Bud Light in hand, and let the quiet settle. The air was warm, the stars faint against the Texas skyline, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt at home in my own skin. The betrayal had destroyed our marriage, yes, but it hadn't destroyed me, and perhaps that was the real triumph. The last text I received from Marissa was brief and hollow. "I hope one day you forgive me." I stared at it, considered it, then deleted it. Forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me. I had no desire to reopen wounds that had already scarred over. Some bridges, once burned, are meant to remain ash. And as I finally turned inside, leaving the porch empty but serene, I whispered to myself, a grin tugging at the corners of my lips, "Sometimes the trash takes itself out." It was a phrase I had laughed at years ago, a quip from a neighbor during a cookout. But now, after months of heartache, confrontation, and rebuilding, it felt profound. Life had a way of balancing itself, often in ways that were both ironic and just. I had lost the illusion of a perfect marriage, but I had gained the truth, the children's trust, and the freedom to rebuild my life on my terms. The Bud Light sat empty beside me, the stars twinkling, the night quiet. And for the first time in a long while, the house felt like a home again. Not a stage for deception, but a sanctuary for healing, laughter, and the small, everyday miracles of normal life.